Hi, I'm Veronica Monet, and I'm a relationship coach, and I'm bringing some helpful tips for you today so that you can shelter in place without conflict. I am noticing a lot of my clients are having meltdowns, and that's not surprising. If you look at the worldwide and national statistics here in the United States, domestic violence is skyrocketing, divorces are on the increase. So let's not have that happen to you. Okay? First thing I'm going to teach you about is how to take a timeout. This is like the bedrock of all the relationship tools. Taking a successful timeout can save so much suffering. It really can. So let's look at why we want to take a timeout. We want to make sure that we're not going to say and do things that we'll regret later. Usually what happens is we've got some triggers from our past, might even go back to our childhood, could be a past relationship, it could even be the relationship we're in right now. And those triggers amplify our rage so that we end up saying really horrible things that no amount of apologizing is really going to compensate for. So rather than go there, rather than create those wounds in the relationship and the connection, we want to take a time out. As soon as you start to feel yourself getting agitated and feeling really invested in winning the argument, that's the good time to take a time out. There is no winning arguments when it comes to long-term relationships. If you win, your partner loses, and ultimately so do you. So as soon as you start to get into that place, you want to take a time out. And it should be as simple as just saying, I'm going to take a time out. Well, it's not that simple if you haven't pre-negotiated the terms of your timeouts with your partner. So that's where we have to back up to the point where you and your partner actually have a meeting. You sit down and you talk about, what are our timeouts going to look like? How long will they be for? Some couples say no more than 20 minutes. Some couples say no more than 24 hours. I always say don't make it more than 72 hours because that's missing persons. But ideally, it's usually an hour or two that you take a timeout. If you can do it in 20 minutes, that's great. But you kind of want to set an outside limit for how long the timeouts will be so that nobody worries about you and wonders, are you coming off your timeout? And that's the next thing. What agreements do we have about coming off a timeout? Too many people think that simply walking into the next room or saying, I've had it, I'm not going to talk about this anymore, is a timeout. It's not. A timeout is something where you have an agreement to have the integrity to come back and start that conversation that got stopped again. So the person who calls the timeout has the responsibility to come back and say, I'm off my timeout. And on the heels of that, you need to let your partner know, I am either available to talk about what we're talking about, or I'm not available to talk about what we're talking about. And if you're not available, you've got to set up a time when you will be. So let's say you come off your timeout, it's late at night, you don't have the energy to resume that conversation that had so much conflict in it, but you are hungry. You could say something like this, I'm off my timeout, I'd love to have dinner with you. I'm not able to have that conversation right now, but I would like to check in with you again at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon to see if we can start talking about it again. In this way, you build trust so that your partner doesn't feel like you're manipulating them or trying to silence them or trying to control the dialogue between the two of you. It's really, really crucial to building that trust. While you're on your timeout, you want to be doing something nice for yourself. This is kind of counterintuitive, especially if you started to go into some things that didn't make you feel so good about yourself. Maybe you yelled, maybe you slammed a door. I still want you to show up and do something good for yourself because it's going to help you get back into a place of emotional balance where you can actually show up for your partner and your family and be more solid in yourself. So let's kind of review the steps on this. First thing about timeouts is you sit down with your partner and negotiate the terms. How long will it be? What do you do? Where do you go? Obviously, you can't leave your house. Well, most of us can't. So you have to find, like, is there a room? I'll go to a particular room. And as long as you're on your timeout, nobody's supposed to bother you. That's really important. Second thing is to have an agreement that whoever calls the timeout will come back, announce that they're off their timeout, and make a date to resume the conversation that was interrupted. And the third thing really is to make sure that you are religious about following this format. I see a lot of people kind of try to cheat around it. Well, I took a timeout, but I forgot to say when I would resume the conversation. What that does over time is it erodes trust, and pretty soon your partner is probably not going to honor your timeouts, and you're not going to get a lot of traction out of that. So I hope that was helpful. I'm going to be posting another video about some other techniques for how you can shelter in place without conflict. And stay safe, healthy. Talk to you soon.